right, and we're live. Mr. Mike Rumble, thank you for stopping by today.
Yeah, no problem. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, I just before we jump into it, I just want to say that I love your name. It's almost like you've got like an MMA fighter name without having to like massage in a nickname in between. Like, have you ever heard
Yeah,
that before? Like people
I
said,
get
Mike
it
Rumble, you're a fighter.
every time that I to make a reservation at a restaurant.
Oh God.
Yeah. It's
Every
original. There is another Mike Rumble though, I think, and I think he worked in advertising somewhere in Mississauga, but I've never met him.
got the right one. We've got the Mike Rumble, who is the founder
Yeah.
and CSO, Chief Strategy Officer of the Epitaph Group. So let's kick it off with you telling us what the Epitaph Group is and what your role there is as a Chief Strategy Officer. And you're also the founder too. We got to throw that in. That's very important.
Yeah. So Epitaph is a media planning buying strategy agency down here in Toronto. That's our single office is on Sherbourne and Adelaide. We were founded back where I founded the company back in 2018. We're about 45 people now. And yeah, I'm the founder and chief strategy officer. So started it back in 2018 on the precipice of the legalization of cannabis. So our first client was actually a cannabis client named Hexo. So started in 2018. Started as actually the CEO of the company, and then I think I was like 6 months in when a friend said to me, "What are you the CEO of? There's like two people in your company," and I then changed. And actually, he had really good reasoning. He's like, a lot of the great kind of the agency principals out there are chief creative officers still, or they're chief strategy officers still. They're not just executives, they actually work on the product. So I changed my title from CEO to CSO, and I've been the CSO of this company ever since. So as well as kind of managing the brand of Epitaph and the growth of Epitaph, it's also managing the strategic product of Epitaph that I also lead.
We're going to come back to that later on, but as always, we
Yeah.
go back to the beginning. I had no idea you're from Vancouver.
Yeah, raised in Vancouver, born in Michigan, raised in Vancouver, like left Michigan when I was 3 years old. Uh, Raised in Vancouver, and went to high school out there and then off to university in Quebec. But I miss Vancouver. I love Vancouver. I had a chance to work in advertising in Vancouver, which I enjoyed. But about maybe 13 years ago now, I think moved to Toronto.
So hold on a second. I had no idea you're American. So what brought
Uh-huh.
the family or brought you as a 3-year-old from Michigan to Vancouver?
Uh, it was my dad lost his job in Michigan, and somehow my parents are both Canadian. My sister and I were born in the U.S. He lost his job in Michigan, where he was president of a company, and he found another company that he wanted to work for out in BC. And so we were lucky. I mean, that's a heck of a place to end up, is on the West Coast, and so that's where my sister and I grew up in out west.
So his job brought the family to Michigan then.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was in mining, and so it brought him to Michigan, and then of course there's a big mining industry in Vancouver, and he went out there for a job, and then actually ran his own company out there as well.
So you don't remember much of your time in Michigan then whatsoever. Your childhood is
Nothing,
it's
nothing.
all Vancouver.
Yeah, I think I remember the car pulling away to move to Vancouver and me forgetting something in the sandbox. That's like my only memory of
Okay.
Michigan.
So I had no idea that your interests and hobbies were focused on theater and acting. How did you find yourself into that?
You know what? It was definitely in high school where I I think it was at camp. So I grew up in Vancouver, but I went to summer camps here in Ontario at a place called Taylor Staton Camps, Camp Amick, up in Algonquin Park. And I think that was probably my first time acting on stage, was in a musical, which was a terrible idea because I can't really sing, of Calvin and Hobbes. And I was Calvin, and I just kind of fell in love with it. And then I went back to Vancouver, and in my high school was in our town and Henry the Fourth, and just picked up like this real passion for theater that I really still do have today. Like, like I said, we're just on Sherbourne and Adelaide, and there's some playhouses around here that have rush tickets. And I still pick up a single ticket once in a while and go down and watch some theater. Um, but I guess I don't think it was in my family or anything. I think I just kind of fell into it. And one of those things where you realize, this might be something I'm good at and I kind of love, and kept doing it for as long as I could.
Did you dabble in music theater? Like, did you try to take up the other portions? I know they like to call it the triple threat, and like the circle of the
Yeah.
Tony actors, where it's like you can dance, you can sing, and you can
Yeah.
act.
I can't dance. I think I can sing kind of, but not enough to sing in front of hundreds of people. But I could act. And I think that that was it. Like you really do need to be kind of multi-talented to do that kind of stuff, especially on the theater side. I think I dabbled in trying film and TV and stuff, and there's an industry in Vancouver. So I went out for some auditions and but my passion was really with theater, and I was more of just like a not a musical theater guy. So
Do you have a favorite musical or play?
well, I did go down to New York not too long ago to watch Our Town, because I hadn't seen it in 30 years since I performed it. And I think it's a beautiful play about, a very singular piece or moment in time in the United States when things seem simple. And I just love the whole tone of that play, and not just from acting in it. I think just from um, I even have actually in this office, one of the first things I bought was a signed copy of the play by Thornton Wilder when I started Epitaph, and COVID was happening and stuff. So there was no way to celebrate. So I started just going, what am I going to do to celebrate? So I buy a couple things. And one of them was an actual signed copy of Our Town by Thornton Wilder. So I do love that play and its themes. And I just saw it literally, I think 6 months ago when I went down to New York.
Did you get a chance to take in Glengarry Glen Ross? Because that's the play that I was hearing a lot about.
I know it hadn't started yet, and I would have loved to see it. I think it's finished now, hasn't it? It was like a quick run.
It was a very quick run because they had a
Yeah,
lot of heavy hitters in there, and those guys you can't tie them down long term because there was Kieran
you can't.
Culkin, uh, Bill Barr, and then I forget who
Yeah.
the third one is. Better Call Saul. I always forget that
That's
actor's
right.
name.
That's right. That's the guy. I mean, I could go down to New York, and I took my kids this time to watch Our Town with me, but I could go down to New York and just watch plays the entire weekend. But there's still good stuff here in Toronto, and when I go back to Vancouver, I still catch plays out there.
You know what my favorite theater is in Toronto? I think it's called the CAA Theater now. And it was the Panasonic
Yeah,
Theater at one point. And I remember the Mirvish people had called me about it, and I said, I tend to not pick plays, but I pick that theater because there's no bad seat in that house at all, in that
I
playhouse.
agree. I
And
agree.
have you seen Potted, like, I don't want to digress too much into this, but have
No,
you
it's
seen
okay.
Potted Potter?
I have not seen Potted Potter.
I am not a Harry Potter fan whatsoever, but literally two
Yeah.
British guys satirically tell the entire Harry Potter story over the course of like 90 minutes. And they do a wonderful
Okay.
job of getting the audience involved. Like there's actually Quidditch played with the audience with beach balls. And my wife is a
Yeah.
massive Harry Potter fan. She could not believe how well they told the story. And I was able to keep up, even though I've seen maybe 3 or 4 of the movies over the course of my
Okay.
life.
Yeah. No, I can handle that. Yeah, that
But
would be
that
okay.
was an awesome one. Have you seen A Funny Thing Happens on the Way to the Forum? Because that is my favorite musical.
I have not.
Yeah, it never really gets much of a long run, but if it does, it's a comedy. If you like, it's more of a PG version, I would say, in vein of God, what's Book of Mormon?
Yeah.
Kind of like
Okay.
that. So if you had any
Okay.
like apprehensions taking kids to Book of Mormon, this would be a good
Yeah.
substitute for it. But again, we're digressing a little bit. But let's talk a little bit about your travels. And you
Mhm.
spent a lot of time working or traveling through Asia, and then you lived in Melbourne as well for a year. Was that just was that primarily by choice, or is that something people do on the West Coast, whereas on the East Coast you hear about people going to backpack Europe?
Yeah, I think it must be more of a West Coast thing. I mean, I think I plan to go out for, it's one of those things you plan to just do Southeast Asia for a few months and then come back to Canada. And I remember uh, I somehow decided that I was going to start in Nepal. And I think a lot of people kind of start in Thailand and then do Laos, Cambodia, and those are certainly countries that I hit. But I started in Nepal and I did a hike in Nepal called the Langtang Circuit, which is an amazing, like, it's only about 10, 12 days, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful hike. And fell in love with Nepal being on the border of Tibet, um, Indian culture. And so then actually, instead of even going back to Bangkok and to Thailand, I was off to India and met some people in India that I wanted to spend more time with. And there's a lot of Australians out there. And after doing a bit more traveling in Southeast Asia, then I made my way down to Melbourne.
Do you have to? I'm just curious about the bureaucracy around going, if there is any bureaucracy to Southeast Asia. Like, did you have to get a lot of visas to enter these countries, or were these visa-free countries for Canadians?
They're pretty good. Like I think, Vietnam, you need a visa. I think it was Laos, Cambodia, you needed a visa, but there are visas that you don't even apply for until you get over there. So it's pretty easy to manage. I mean, I've looked since one of the dreams of mine would be to go to Bhutan. And obviously those are heavy visa requirements in countries like that. But no, it's kind of like you land in Bangkok and you go, it's just that age too. You're walking down Koh San Road and you're looking at the travel agencies going, where am I going next? And that's part of the excitement of it too, is not too much planning. Yeah.
And was it the Australians you met that's what brought you to Melbourne, or were you always going to close off that trip in Australia?
No, I was not planning on going to Australia. I was like, all right, I'll go to Australia. I'll buy a van in Perth, and I'll drive across the Nullarbor, and I'll make my way to Melbourne and see what happens there. And that's exactly what happened. And I didn't know I was going to stay for a year, but I stayed for an entire year. At my going away party, I lost my passport, so I was there for another week. My parents thought I'd actually lost it on purpose, but I was there for another week, and I came home then.
Nice. So you had a left-hand drive van. You're shifting with
That's
your left
right.
hand and everything. Nice. How was that? I've spent some time in countries that in the UK where they drive on the other side. How did you adjust to that?
It just takes a few days. Like I've done it again since I can't remember where I had to do it last, but I think it was a lot to take on in terms of you're in a van. It's not just like it's a standard, but it's like it's not where you typically have a standard stick shift, right? It's like a
Was it up
van.
in the
So you're
dashboard?
it's up in the
Yeah.
dashboard beside the steering wheel. So like there's a lot going on. You end up hitting the famous one is, and this is absolutely true. Like you go for your turn signal and you hit your windshield wipers.
Yes.
So most people in Australia know the foreigners that are coming down the street because they're taking a left-hand turn and they're on a 35 degrees Celsius day and their windshield wipers are going.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do you credit your dad as your biggest influence?
Well, I think he had his own business for one. So when I was growing up, he ran his own business. He sold it, I think, in 1995, and then went on to, I would say, live his real dream, which was to purchase a property in Ontario, a horse farm in Ontario. I think there's really simple accolades about him. Like he won a bronze medal in the 1956 Olympics when he was a
Really?
three-day eventer. Yeah. So he's a three-day eventer. So there's those times when I was in kindergarten that I'd bring by my dad and, he'd present to the class what it was like to go to the Olympics. And then I'd be the popular kid for the day because I had the dad that went to the Olympics. And
Can you break down
so I
his
get,
event? Sorry, while we're still on that, can you break down his event one more
yeah,
time? You said it was a 3-day eventer?
it's 3-day eventing. So it's an old
Eventing, okay.
military equestrian event
Okay.
that goes over 3 days. So the first day is dressage, the second day is cross country to see the endurance that your horse has, and then the third day is jumping to make sure that they can recover from the cross country that they did the day before. So it's like it's almost like a triathlon, but it's for horses, and it is an old military event. They still have it in the Olympics today. It's one that I think is a little bit threatened now because it's very expensive for countries to transport horses. But it's an amazing event. It's more popular, obviously, in the UK and other countries than it is in Canada, but we still have a great Canadian team that we try to get into the games each time. So there was a lot of pride, I think, in terms of looking up to him as a role model back then. And then I think him having his business, but then him really since 1995 until he passed away in 2023, just continuing to build off of like an amazing dream of um, having a farm and watching him go through really like another phase of his career from the time he was, let's say, 65 until he was 90, which is pretty crazy. And
Your
still running an operation. That's
mm.
crazy. Yeah.
Your first job ever was working
Mhm.
at the Keg. I've got a lot of people that
Yeah.
worked in the restaurant business. What did you learn about yourself working at the Keg? And which keg did you work at?
So maybe everybody says they worked at the flagship keg. I consider the flagship keg to be the Granville Island keg in Vancouver. So,
Okay.
and it was cool because if you know Vancouver, it's just Granville Island, just a small area. But it was kind of like a group of us. Some of us worked at the keg, some of us worked at the old sirloin, or some of us worked at Bridges. So like there was like a community of us kids that were bus boys and hostesses um, and waiters and bartenders and stuff. We weren't quite old enough to be bartenders yet, but a lot of us kind of just starting off as bus boys and stuff. So that's where I started. The keg's got a really amazing culture, I think. Like, I mean, I still talk to people that worked at the keg, and people that didn't even work at my keg but worked at others seem to have a similar experience. So it feels like they kind of got down how to train kids or how to train employees. Um, and I just think it taught, especially being a busboy, you're running around, like you're working hard, and you're working sometimes, weird shift hours. Maybe you're finished at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're only 15 years old and you got to wake up for school the next day, but you still stick around. And I guess at that point, like have a Diet Coke after work with some older guys who are 20, 21 and they're waiters. Like it's just a really good kind of environment to teach you about work ethic, but have a good culture. um, I just thought it was an amazing experience. And also like just, I worked as a busboy. I also worked in the kitchen and you learn about promotions and, how you get to your next level and you go from the salad bar to cooking appies to saute to being the plater to being the first cook, like it kind of gives you a responsibility that it's kind of up to you of how quickly you want to go up that chain is based on how hard you work.
You started traveling again. You made the move across Canada to Bishop's University. Instead of swinging back to Vancouver, you found yourself in Toronto. So let's start first with that because you were doing promotional work on the Labatt Blue Light account. Was the plan always to go to leave Quebec and then go to Toronto, or was the original plan to go back to Vancouver?
The plan was to, I'm trying to think back now. Vancouver. So the reason I went to Bishops was I went to St. George's School in Vancouver, which I love, but my friends were going to Western Queens, Dow, UVic, and I just wanted to go somewhere. I don't know, which that time in my life I wanted to go somewhere different. And so I picked Lennoxville, Quebec, and I picked Bishops University. Vancouver is my favorite city in the world, but it's also small, right?
It
And
is.
it feels like after that many years, it feels like every alley and every corner. And so I wanted something different. I went to Bishops, and then I left Bishops, and I did some like just Ontario traveling, I think, and then went down to and then decided at some point I was up in London, Ontario, visiting a friend, and he was going back to Toronto one day, and I thought, oh, I'll take the bus with you, and I'll go down to Toronto with you, and I ended up here, and and I'd met a girl, and her mom worked at HYPN, and she was the one that was working on the Labatt account and introduced me to my first job in marketing through an organization that I still try to find, Kane Communications. If anybody knows Kane Communications that was in Aurora, I always try to find these guys because they were the ones that actually got me into this whole thing.
Is Kane with a C or a K?
K, and it was the company that Labatt had hired to do this promotion at the Skydome.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Was the plan always to get into marketing after university, or were you just kind of keeping your options open?
I think I was keeping my options open. I probably thought that, acting might still be a thing. But I think I was wandering a little bit. And, I think it's true in our industry is that, um, some people kind of just fall into this a little bit. I was definitely writing a lot. I think when I first wanted to get into advertising, I was screenwriting at the time, taking some courses on that. But I think that, and so that kind of leads you to the copywriting thing, and maybe it's copywriting, and I'll work on the creative side in advertising. But um, that wasn't it. Somehow I fell into media, and I'm happy that I did.
Did that help indulge the side of you that was really into theater and acting as well? Like, did you find like that you could make a connection between working in media and then also still like did it give you the kind of how do I put it? Did you get sort of the same buzz that you got when you would pursue things with theater?
I don't think so. Like, I think that there's a creativity there that, and an insight about people that I think is there is a common thread between theater and acting and storytelling and us trying to find real insight with people to connect with them. I think that's there. And now I see it more than ever. I see this amazing connection between kind of that aspiration that I had and where I've ended up in terms of media and conversations that I have with clients. I think way back then, though, I was a TV buyer, so there wasn't a lot of connection between that theater part of my life, and except it was exciting to be around kind of there is celebrity involved and there's cool events and all that kind of stuff. But I think only over time did I see that real connection or that value from being interested in theater to where I am now.
And your next move, was that to OMD where you were an account supervisor?
Yeah, so I was in Toronto, and that's right. I was in Toronto and I was a TV buyer and I enjoyed it, but I would have planning conversations sometimes. This was at HYPN. So you'd be invited into a brainstorm. And I remember like one specific brainstorm that I was in. And Steve Went was leading the Honda account at that point. And I remember him just going, "Oh, that was a really cool idea that you had during that brainstorm or something." And I thought that's kind of more of what I want to do. I want to think more about the planning side of things. But the HYPN was a big agency. I think it became, or it's just about to become PhD, somewhere in that time period. And it was hard to like kind of move from a TV buying position to planning. But then something opened up at OMD Vancouver, and I applied for it. I was just like, well, maybe this is for me. So I applied to OMD Vancouver, and a friend who became a very close friend of mine, Jeff Berry, was the general manager out there, and he hired me to come in and work on McDonald's. And of course, McDonald's it was a planning role, but there's a whole lot of television that went along with that at that point. So the experience in TV buying translated well into my first job in planning. And I still think that first little bit of my career being in TV buying was important in terms of understanding the currency of media and the value of media, what things cost, and it was just good managers at HYPN helping out a lot.
So you made the move back to Vancouver. You just
Yeah.
mentioned that. By this point, you've had a couple of jobs in the industry. Did you see a difference between working for an agency in Vancouver versus in Toronto? I've had the chance to work with Vancouver agencies, and I find the
Mhm.
people there are a lot more relaxed. Like
Yeah.
I have to end the lunches. Like I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I flew out here for 3 days. I really do have a hard stop at 2:30 because I've got something at 3 that I got to get to. And they're like, are you sure we could keep going? And I'm like, whereas in Toronto, if they tell you they're done at 2, they're done at 2.
Yeah. I think there is a better pace sometimes that happens out there, and it's a good reminder that you know we work in fun jobs and we work in fun agencies. I think there is a little bit, they're a bit more relaxed out there. I didn't know that when I went to Vancouver that was going to help me a lot because the agencies are smaller, and people can recognize good good talent much quicker, I think, in Vancouver in a smaller shop than they can necessarily in places like Toronto. So I like the pace out there. I miss the pace out there. I still work with, Cobbs. Cobbs is one of our clients, and so and we work with Rethink Vancouver quite a bit. So there's excuses for me to get out there, and it's a good reminder that we need to slow things down a little bit. It's just it's a and also there's a nice friendliness between the agencies out there, I think, which is great too.
So when you made the jump to media experts, were you employee number one? Because I believe you were building their Vancouver office at that point.
So no, I wasn't. So that Jeff Berry, who I mentioned, who was general manager of OMD, I was, I think, called up by Mark Sherman, the owner of Media Experts, and said, "Hey, I need to start something in Vancouver." Media Experts obviously had the TELUS account.
Hmm.
I think at that point, TELUS Mobility was run out of Toronto, but TELUS Home Services was still, and TELUS Home Services and maybe TELUS Corporate was run out of Vancouver. And so Media Experts started an office in Vancouver, and we opened it up down in Gastown. I'd known Jeff from OMD, and he called me up. So I guess I was technically the second employee of Media Experts Vancouver, and at that point, exclusively really to service the TELUS account.
What's it like building, say, a new agency with someone from the ground up? Like, so it sounds like if I've got this right, on one hand, you're playing a coach trying to put everything together, all the pieces together, hire people. But then on the other hand, you've got to make sure that all the plans go to market and they happen because they've still got to advertise while you're building that office.
Yeah, I think building that office. I mean, you're building an office, but you have the support of a large organization in Toronto. So, you're not building Epitaph was a lot different, I think, than maybe building Media Experts Vancouver, because you're basically sponsored by the larger agency. I think what was interesting about Experts was that Taxi was also opening in Vancouver at the same time.
Mm,
So
okay.
Taxi was also working on TELUS. I still think an amazing relationship existed between Media Experts and Taxi, one that's quite unique in that relationship. And it was based around ClearNet that was later TELUS. So we were starting something up. So was Taxi. And in fact, that meant that we started in the same office. And it was like a tiny little office. Michael Mays and Karen Pierce and Jeff Berry, myself and Megan Hawes and a bunch of folks. Um, and so it wasn't just like two agencies meeting each other. It was like two agencies starting together, which put us on this great I think, journey together, and one that I was on LinkedIn the other day and talked about as being just a very um, unique structure or engagement model was those two agencies. So we grew it with Taxi. I don't remember there being a lot of pain. TELUS was a great client. We all got behind it. There was really creative work being done. So we had a big, that's, I guess, the difference. You're growing an agency with a big client, which is great, and an agency to support you, which was awesome.
You brought up Taxi. You
Mhm.
actually ended up working at Taxi, and it brought you back to Toronto. Let's start first with how that opportunity came about and what was the attraction to leaving Vancouver and going back to Toronto?
Uh, I think that, like, with media experts, so Jeff had left media experts and I was running the Vancouver office. Uh, Media experts actually resigned the TELUS account. And they were doing it at the same time that they were fortunate enough to be looking at bringing on Bell as their client to replace TELUS. So we finished our contract with TELUS, and there were still good clients that we were running in Vancouver. But Mark Sherman, Richard Ivey asked if I could come out to Toronto and run the Bell account out of Toronto. So it was actually media experts that moved me to Toronto, and I was probably in the Toronto office for maybe 9, 12 months working on Bell before I joined Taxi, which was one floor down. And I'd known enough people from Taxi throughout the past few years that they called on me and they said, "Hey, listen, we're walking into a lot of board." I think this is the story, if I can remember it right. And I'm not going to try to exaggerate it, but I'll just make it simple. Taxi was basically saying, "Hey, listen, we walk into a lot of boardrooms. We've got media on the other side of the table with some of our clients. We don't really understand what they're talking about. We're not able to kind of um, challenge some of the recommendations that they're making, and we feel like we're kind of stuck. It would be great to have somebody in media on our side of the table who can help us understand or help us bring some of our ideas to media so they can see the real value behind them." So I joined Taxi, and it was another great experience. They were really starting to build a strategy team. So we actually, all these different strategists sat around what we call the surfboard table at Taxi. There might have been like 10 of us. There was brand strategy, creative strategy, social strategy, connection strategy, which is what we called media strategy. Um, and some amazing talent, people that we like, are like Michelle Lee, Sean McDonald was at that table. Jason Lonsdale was the head of strategy at the time, who I think now is with Ogilvy Global. Like, there was a really good team. And so, but we all kind of did something different, and I was the one guy who was doing media essentially, and as opposed to being assigned to an account, it was more trying to help where I could from a media perspective, to help get creative, um, more opportunity to have better conversations with the media agency.
You don't hear a lot about that because it's if I had to summarize that role, you were creating that bridge between media and creative, but it's a very tense bridge. Kind of like on my side of the
Yeah,
aisle, where we always talk about sales and marketing. If you're publisher or vendor side, there seems to be a disconnect because marketing wants to talk about this, and then sales comes in and says, that's not the way the clients are using the product. Those aren't the talking points we need to sell this through. Did you
yeah,
find that that was a tense relationship because all of a sudden this media guy gets parachuted in, and I have to imagine that you were outnumbered,
yeah.
or at least at the beginning you were outnumbered, and you were trying to let them know that, hey, what you've put together is wonderful, but that doesn't translate well to action on a TV spot or a radio spot and so forth.
Yeah, I can still feel the tension of walking into rooms and having the media agency there, and I think I probably went a little bit naive. I went in, really saying like, "Hey, I think I can get some of these media things through by speaking, with the creatives," thinking that that would help. When I came back and said, "Hey, there's this great creative idea. What can you help us with?" And so there, and that was a tension that existed then. I think in a lot of places it still exists today. People have a hard time maybe listening to the other side, and it's probably never been more important that we do. Um, and I think what was most interesting for me was I grew a real, I don't know if it's empathy or compassion for the challenge of creative. Like, had I taken up with that copywriting career, and worked on the creative side of this industry, it is unbelievably difficult. It is incredibly subjective. at least in media, there's some kind of qual that we can stand behind and data that we can use to prove it. And it's really tough on the creative side. And I think that one of the biggest takeaways that I had was, media would always walk into the room and say, why are, you didn't send this to us last Thursday. How can we possibly support this idea when we're in the room with the client this morning? But the truth is that like creative's still hammering away at 4 o'clock in the morning, like they're still trying to finish this thing up. And it's like, and I think just that kind of understanding has helped me a lot in my career of like what creative is up against, how difficult it is. And certainly media doesn't need to be challenging them like that. There's got to be an understanding there. So that was my big takeaway, I think, from working at Taxi, and still have great relationships, obviously, from that agency.
You moved on to Cossette and you were their VP and managing director, but I noticed that TELUS was one of your clients. So was that a bit of
Mm-hmm.
a homecoming for you?
Yep, that was so I stayed at Taxi for a few years, and then and this is from a guy that did not want to move agencies as much as I guess I have. When you look back, sometimes you're like, wow, if somebody was to ask me, I'd probably say I was at 3 agencies, but I guess I was at more than that. But yeah, I left Taxi and joined Cossette. I think Cossette was looking because Telus knew me quite well. If there was, I am guessing, I'm pretty sure that I was one of the names on the list that they would have suggested, or that they did suggest, to come over and help them run their entire business. So it was not just home services that I really run from Vancouver, but instead home services and mobility and the Telus Media business.
You mentioned that you really enjoyed doing the strategy for these clients. As you move up the ladder, I imagine you're becoming more of a coach and less of a player. Was that the case? And if it was that difficult for you, letting go of certain responsibilities that you really enjoy doing?
Yeah. I think that when you get to a certain position, you are really managing people. But I think that one of the things that I appreciate now is I've been relatively close to the product. So when I was hired by Cassette, Pierre Delagrave was still leading Cassette Media out of Montreal, and he was trying to find the right title for me. And he was working with David Jowett to figure that out. And I'd applied for a position general manager. That's what I'd applied for. And it was Pierre that turned around and said to David, I think his title should be media manager. And David's like, I don't think we can call him media manager. Like that he's a little more senior than that. We need to give him something else. But they called me managing director. And it was because Pierre said, like, I don't want him to just be a general manager of things. I want him to be involved in the product. Like that's what we're bringing him here for. And so I was managing director, but I think I took a much larger product role still. And in fact, that's where I started to think through like, okay, what is media strategy? And in fact, at some point, somebody said to me, I was frustrated with somebody on the team, and I said, hey, they don't even get what strategy is. And somebody said, well, if they don't get what strategy is, you have to teach them what it is. And you look around a little bit, there's not a lot on what media strategy is. So you have to start to figure it out yourself and go, okay, this is our product and this is what we're here to sell and this is how we're going to talk to clients. So I never got to the point, I don't think, at Cassette where I was completely uninvolved in the product itself. It was, but for like based, like just like you just kind of mentioned, what was encouraging was building that product and then teaching the team or working with the team on what that meant still. So that was a pretty exciting moment in my career, I think, where I got to develop for the first time what a strategic product might look like. Whether I agree with that product today or not, I think it was a good product at the time.
So success for you there was recalibrating what the definition of success was for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
100%. Yeah, yeah.
And so what brought you then to Starcom Unison? Because there you were their chief. I guess this is the first time you had the title chief strategy officer.
Yeah. What got me there was I think there's a couple roles in my career that pulled me. What do they say? Like you run to a position or you run from a position. I don't think I was running away from Cassette, but I think there was something really intriguing about that was to work specifically on the TD bank account. Um, and I think that the notoriety of something like TD, working in a different category like financial services, there was a unique opportunity when they won TD to run an agency, to actually start another agency. So when I started at Starcom, I actually started something called Unison, and Unison might still exist. I think it does. Unison was our agency that supported TD across from Publicis, across Saatchi for search, across Starcom for planning and buying, and across Sapient for analytics. So it was actually, I was running kind of three different teams that were all supporting TD. And we were actually sitting in the Sapient office at the E1 building on Peter Street. So it was another chance to build something, which was pretty exciting, work on a big account like TD Bank, and I, I was even part of the naming of Unison. I worked with a friend and we named Unison. So that's it. Looking back, I don't know if I could completely realize that I was starting an agency, but I was starting an agency that was a part of three different publicist shops.
Was it a bit of a change for you going from, or how big of a change was it going from, say, telco? Because it sounds like telco dominated a lot of your career and then moving over
Mhm.
to financial services.
Yeah, I think that financial services, that was much more of a people role. That became
Gotcha.
much more of an exercise in HR as opposed to and process as opposed to anything that was strategy that I'd done in my career. So it was a good experience. That's where I met Alistair Taylor. I still love Alistair. I got to work with some good people, but it was only 2 years that I was there before I kind of figured it probably wasn't the right place for me.
And this is where you started the Epitaph Group. So let's
Mhm.
start first with the idea and where it came from, because I know a lot of agency people. I've been doing this gig on my side for about 17 years, and it seems like 9 out of 10 people have at some point in their careers kicked around the idea of starting their own agency. Not 9 out of 10 people started. Let's be very clear. That number is a lot smaller. But were you in that group of that 90 percentile, we'll say, who, for the 10, 15 years leading up to you starting Epitaph were like, I think I'm just going to go out on my own. I'm just going to start this. I've got enough knowledge and experience to do so.
I think I always kicked around I think from day one, like I think when I was that TV buyer at HYPN, I was like, what if I was in the corner office? So I had
I
aspirations,
like that voice,
but
like that old school
yeah,
media person who smokes too much.
that's right. And
That's what it sounds like.
and I think that's what it is. It's like a little bit of a dream, right? And so Mike Rumble at 21 or 22 wanting to be in the corner office isn't that much different from a Mike Rumble at 33 that's like, one day I'm going to open my own agency. The realism's not there. And so I think I thought about it before. People would tell me, like you mentioned, like, Rumble, good name for an advertising agency, right? Like Rumble Advertising. I think I might have even trademarked that or incorporated that company at some point with a dream that maybe it would happen. But I don't think any of it was very, very serious until, and that's what they say is when experience meets opportunity. Um, that's when luck occurs. And I think it required something besides me just jumping into it, to starting something of my own. But I dreamed about it before, but I don't think I took it. I don't think it was realistic until that opportunity showed up.
And that opportunity was legalization of cannabis.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
legalization, I mean, it went through Parliament at one point. I don't know at the time, and I think the time frame might have been more than even a year before the point when it got to the point where you could actually go legally buy it. When it was
Yeah.
first legalized, and again, it was legalized in Parliament, but again, it would still be another 12, 14 months before it was legal. Is that the point where you
Mhm.
said, okay, I've got a bit of a runway here to get this going? Let me see what I
No.
can do. No, not at all.
No, I guess I was just still working on TD and stuff. And what happened was a friend of mine who owns an agency in Toronto, he we thought about working together and maybe starting some media operation within his agency. And it never really happened because everybody gets busy. And again, it was just kind of a dreamy thing. Anyways, he phoned me up one day and he goes, "Hey, I got this buddy and he's got a connection to a cannabis company called Hexo. And they're looking for a media agency. And to be honest, like, cannabis was a special opportunity. The big agencies wouldn't take on cannabis clients at that point. So that wasn't really available to them.
I had no
Um,
idea. Is that because remember when cannabis was legalized and there was a lot of concern that if you crossed over the border into the United States, you'd be prosecuted for it? Like
right.
they even told you
It was
not
the
to buy
same thing.
cannabis with a credit card to use your debit
I think
card.
so. I think even banks said, like, listen, we can't give bank accounts to companies that are accepting dollars from cannabis companies.
I
Like,
remember hearing that
you
too.
couldn't,
Yeah.
you couldn't get insurance on your work with cannabis companies. So like it wasn't great for the multinationals, right? It was like they were still trying to figure it out. Um, and from my perspective, I could I could kind of do it all on my own. So like there's certain things that I know how to do and certain stuff that I don't. I don't know, like I didn't know how to buy a Facebook campaign. I didn't know how to do a search campaign, but both of those platforms you couldn't work on with cannabis anyhow. So we were kind of like, okay, let's this is something where I can go out and I can talk. Snapchat was actually one of the first platforms we got on. So there was very few platforms that we could choose from or that we could work with, which meant that it only required me, right? I didn't need a search team, a social team, performance team. It was like, we just need to go out and try to drive awareness for Hexo. So it was the perfect moment. And I went out to Gatineau, Quebec, where the Hexo office was, and also the Hexo farm, which was pretty cool. And I went out there 3 or 4 times, and I remember driving back from Gatineau, Quebec, and being in the car, and they just said to me like, "Hey, okay, the business is yours." After pitching like 3 or 4 times, and I was like, it was like that Jerry Maguire moment of like, "Here we
Nice.
go!" Right? Like we're going to open up or I'm going to open up an agency, and I don't know what it's going to be called, but I'm going to open it up and I'm going to start working on Hexo. And that was the moment that it all kind of kicked off. And because I had a client, I could resign from my position and be comfortable knowing that I'd be okay, or I was pretty sure I'd be okay.
Did you have to get any sort of legal representation or have an advertising lawyer, or I guess I would say a cannabis lawyer on the side
Yeah,
just to help guide you through that? Because there were so many
yeah.
restrictions. Like you said, it wasn't just people weren't, it's not like you could advertise everywhere and people thought it was taboo and they were staying away from it. There were some pretty solid restrictions.
Yeah, so that was funny. The good news is that I was getting paid by Hexo, so I could employ and put on retainer a cannabis lawyer. The cannabis lawyer that I had liked to give me more advice on marketing and media than he did on law, but he was a
God.
cannabis lawyer.
So they would like look over your
So
creative and be
yeah,
critical of it.
yeah, you're paying them by the hour, then they're commenting on your plans. But it was helpful. Like I just I wanted to limit any risk. Health Canada was also, very, very stringent, obviously, on any advertising. To try to go on Snapchat with a cannabis campaign and convince Health Canada that it was legit and followed the regulations, like all of that was quite complicated and new. So I took that. I appreciate sometimes you look back and you surprise yourself, and I that was good. That was a good way to go about it, was to have some legal advice on what we can and can't do. And certainly we had a couple of calls from Health Canada and we're able to very, very quickly actually kind of get over those and make them feel comfortable.
Is it safe to say that without legalization of cannabis, there might not be an Epitaph Group today?
I think 100%. Like I think it's crazy because there's a lot of negative perception, I think, around the cannabis industry, or just not negative perception. Just there's been bad case studies, right? Like you see retailers go up all the time, and then 3 weeks later they shut down. We've got our bad actors within the cannabis industry that kind of moved over from the gray market to the legal market, and it didn't go so well. But I don't think anybody ever kind of realized, like, this little advertising agency, even though we don't have a cannabis client anymore, it was incorporated on October 17th, I think, of 2018. This is a product of the legalization of cannabis. And I used to say, we're not cannabis activists, but I'm certainly an advocate of cannabis, not just in terms of the legalization of it, but also it helped some businesses, and it helped a business like mine. And I'm not sure we'd be here without it.
It's crazy because this is an awesome case study about timing.
Yeah.
Like without having all of the knowledge and ambition that you had built up and the timing of legalization, like those two things cross. Like, I mean, I don't want to call it luck, but sometimes it is luck that, the
It
Canadian
is luck.
government
Yeah.
said, we're going to legalize it finally. Been kicking that ball down or that can down the street for a number of years between different parties. And yeah, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you said, some people, I have a hard time putting myself in the entrepreneur category sometimes because there was an opportunity right in front of me. And at that point, there seemed to be low risk. And sometimes I think entrepreneurs are the guys that, um, that picked up golf balls at the golf course and sold them to the, out in the parking lot. Like those feel like entrepreneurs to me. And so when we heard about legalization 14 months before, I didn't jump on a bandwagon and go, what am I going to do with this thing that's changed in our country? Yeah, I had to wait until it was right there in front of my face. I'm like, oh, there's something in this for me. And so there was definitely some luck, but I do believe in that saying of like it's timing and it's experience that come together.
Would you even say that all the experience you've had with cannabis advertising that you could unofficially qualify yourself as a legal expert in that field? Because I have to imagine if you're going in to pitch another cannabis company, all the
Yeah.
questions they've got, you're like, I don't even need the lawyer here for that. I could answer all of these questions. Like you've got a certain level of expertise that came from that experience that very few marketers in our industry have.
Yeah. So I think when we finished with Hexo, I would have said like we should have it would have been great to start on something else right away. That's a few years ago now. We have a couple of restricted categories within our agency now, and unfortunately, cannabis is one of those. It's just a rock and roll industry, right? Like, it helped us a lot, but I find it's like in our business, it's a high risk industry, and so I feel like I probably lost some of the knowledge or some of the experience that I had has probably changed quite a bit in terms of what you need now. And as an agency, we just made the call that we're not working on cannabis clients anymore. Maybe we met some dynamite one that had the right purpose and the right values and the right vision. I'm sure we could be convinced, but that hasn't happened lately. And so I'd probably have to re-educate myself, I would imagine.
Before we move to rapid fire questions, I want to
Mhm.
ask you where the name Epitaph Group comes from.
So Epitaph So one thing, a couple of funny things about Epitaph. Some people don't know how to pronounce it. Sometimes they come into this agency and it's Epitaph. A lot of people call it Epitaph, like a TH at the end instead of a PH. And then other people are like, that seems like a very morbid name for an agency.
It does
Um,
in a way. I thought it was an analogy for like current advertising methods are dead and so
well,
forth, and we do
and
something new.
sometimes I think that as we've kind of repositioned ourselves lately, I there is a little bit of that, right? Like we talk a little bit about that, but I think for me it was there's a few different reasons. I've had these great experiences throughout my life, and whether they were at the keg or whether they were, working at HYPN back in the day or taxi or whatever, there's like these moments in time that I really appreciate. And I wanted to create something that everybody could be really proud of. And something that, they'd be proud to bring to share with their kids. They'd be proud one day to say that they worked here and they could learn something here that they could literally share with the rest of the world. And so Epitaph for me um, is a story worth sharing or something you've learned along the way that's important enough to pass on. And that's what I'm trying to create here is an experience that's worth sharing, I think. Um, I think also now it's turned into more than just that. I think now it's turned into a little bit of like, we want to leave the industry better than we found it kind of
Gotcha.
thing.
Okay.
Like, and so for me, there's a lot of purpose behind Epitaph. I think there's a lot of different interpretations for it. What I'm most proud of is that we have something on our wall that really does represent our values. We're not an acronym. We're not my last name. We stand for something, and we stand for a way to do business that's respectful and that's something that we can be proud of.
Okay, Mike, we're going to bring it home. You ready for rapid fire
Yep.
questions?
I think so. I think so.
Okay, the campaign you're
Yeah.
most proud of.
Hexo by a long shot.
Your favorite
Do
movie.
I need to tell you why? Do I need to tell you why, or we just go Hexo?
No, you can tell us why. Go for it.
I say Hexo because it's what started this agency. We worked so closely with our media partners like Snapchat and others to make it come to life because everybody was in a bit of a risky situation. We all felt like we were invested in it completely. It was exciting. It was tense. And we were doing something brand new in this country that nobody had ever done before. So that's why that one. Yeah.
Your favorite movie.
My favorite movie is MacGruber.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
I would want One or two people. So I would say I'm from the '90s, and the best looking guy in the '90s was Ethan Hawke. So I go with Ethan Hawke. He could do this no problem. Or Steve Carell because he's one of the best leaders of any company.
Nice. I got the reference immediately.
There you go.
All right. My follow up: if Hollywood were to make that movie based on your life story, what would we call it?
I think we'd have to call it like how old am I now? 47, 47 acts or something like that. There's just been so many different moments. And I think that it's, there's not one story. I just feel like there's lots of different stories that finally will come together. And I think they're coming together in Epitaph, to be honest with you.
Your favorite book?
Prayer for One Meanie by John Irving.
Your favorite song?
Uh, my favorite song, that's a really, really hard one. It's like your favorite movie. It's hard to put just one. I will say I'll have to just go with Neil Young and like Cortez the Killer or Powderfinger or something. If I had to listen to it on repeat on a desert island, I'd pick one of those two, I think. Yeah, Cortez the Killer or Powderfinger.
Best advice you have ever received?
The best advice I'd ever received was by my dad, and I'm trying to remember it. Enjoy the satisfaction of becoming. I'm not going to get it quite right, but enjoy the satisfaction of becoming without losing the happiness of being. Um, and I said that one in his eulogy because he was adamant about it, but it's true. It's just like you can enjoy all of this growth that we see at this agency and look forward to the next thing, but like be in this moment and enjoy just this.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
I would say do it, figure out the thing that you could do from 9 to 5 every single day and try to do that you would love to do. And if you can't do that, find a job where one day you can pay yourself.
And my signature closing question: if you weren't in media, what would you be doing and why?
I think I wouldn't be able to get on stage again, but I would run a small theater somewhere here in Vancouver, somewhere in Vancouver, out here in Toronto. Be the owner, but rip the tickets at the front entrance.
And we're going to end things right here. Mike, thanks
Yeah.
so much for stopping by.
Thank you, Victor. That was great. Thank you.